And then they started getting pugnacious with another player who wasn't like dialed in to the like competitive scene in the way they were, and they were like, no, we gotta set up the terrain like this app. And the guy, he comes over and he's like, they're telling me I need to set up the terrain like this app. So I come over, I'm like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Like, because I have the 40K app and I have the Age of Sigmar app, and there's no fucking terrain on either of those. And then they bust out this thing and they're like, no, this is the official tournament terrain layouts. And I'm like, first of all, no, I don't care about that. We're not doing that. This is not an official 40K tournament. This is supposed to be fun. Just make a board that looks cool, looks kind of neat. Okay, that's A. Like,
yeah,
B,
right.
if you look at the way these terrain that they tell you to set up the terrain, you can see it in some of these pictures. Like, it's just this completely abstracted jank where it's like there would not be any streets in this city. There would not be any kind of focal points. It's just geometric shapes that have been dropped onto a plane.
So I don't know where you want to start. Like, what was Christmas like in a friendly local gaming store?
Over here it was bonkers, man. It was bonkers. You can't like we just did a ton of business. More than I thought we would, honestly. I don't know, that sounds weird, but like more than I thought we would. One of the things that always blows my mind is how like resilient the Games Workshop like brand is, regardless of any other thing that's going on at any given moment. I almost got completely just sold out of 40K. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, when I say sold out, I mean like I probably had like 24 boxes of various kits on the shelf, and then everything else was just gone. So I'm currently in rebuilding mode where I'm just trying to get the product back in, which is hard because it just turns so fast. Like the appetite for 40K product in particular is just so great. I had a guy in the shop the other day and he's like, well, you know, Games Workshop could sell more product if they reduced the price.
They don't need to.
Exactly. I was just like, dog, like, go online, see how much of it's sold out. Like, they don't need to reduce the price, bro.
Right. It's crazy because I saw Hellstorm Hellstorm Mike, who's also based in Sheffield, who's got a popular YouTube stream, was talking about the Games Workshop half-year financials that came out on the 14th. It's fucking crazy, right?
Oh, I have no doubt.
Really mental. Like, again, they've increased, revenue. They've increased. This is the crazy thing, right? Between let's see. So for the same periods of the last 6 months versus the same period the year before, the licensing revenue almost tripled. So while their core revenue went up by about 30 million, so they went from 235 to 269, their licensing revenue went from 12 million in that period to 30 million for the same period for this year. And we all know what that fucking is, right?
Yeah.
What is that? It's Space Marine 2. Because if you dig into it, it gets really crazy, like properly nutty numbers. So I'm going to read this from the financial report, because when you read it, you're just like, what the fuck? So, where is it? It says income. Where is it? Income earned. License revenue from royalty, blah blah blah, in the period, increased for the period to 30 million. Blah 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 blah. Earned income was, and of that 30 million, right? Most of it, I think it works out like about 80% of that income increase was from selling Space Marine 2 computer game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the future. That's the future of Games Workshop. And I mean, honestly, if you look at Star Wars or comic books or anything, and you like you like the direction that those things have gone by like heavily monetizing the IP, then I'm sure you'll be happy with what's coming forward from Warhammer. You know,
And
I'm sure you'll be super stoked.
And here's the licensing breakdown. Licensing revenue splits as 98% was made from PC and console games, so Space Marine 2 and, a
You
little
mean it
bit
wasn't
of Dark.
Joy Toy? 98%
No.
wasn't Joy Toy? What the hell?
1% was made from mobile games, and 1%
Okay.
was other. And we know what other contains. Other contains shit I worked on, which is roleplay games plus Joy Toy plus fucking
Nurgle
candles, I
plushies. You gotta get them
Yeah,
Nurgle
right.
plushies in there. Those we hand out those the squigs, the squig plushies as prizes. And I put them in like a big basket, and then it's like, oh, you won this thing. You get to choose something from the prize basket, right? And like, I can't keep those squig plushies in there, man. Like people want their squig plushies, which like grown ass men. I'm not talking about like, it's not like there's like a little child and they go, oh hey, have the little child come forward and like they can get something. It's like, no, like grown ass men are like, give me that squig plushie.
Give me that squig plushie.
So yeah,
I need to sleep with it with
that's in there.
my waifu wife pillow. Jesus Christ. So yeah, it's kind of a fascinating breakdown of stuff because, as you said, right, we're in a cost of living crisis with loads of things. There are wars, there are energy costs if you're living in the UK and stuff, which is like whatever. And then they're still literally printing money. And remember, this is a company that has like zero debts, has just entered the FTSE 100. And remember, what was it? Oh yeah. Was it Female Custodies was gonna like break Games Workshop? Remember that?
Well,
that really didn't happen.
Right.
So,
right.
And I guess,
yeah. I mean, the guys who said that they were going to quit Games Workshop over that were the same guys who like still come into the shop and complain about the old world. They're like,
and the ones that really complain.
World. They blew up the old world, and now the old world's back, but I still don't want to play it. It's like, okay,
right?
All right,
because they don't fucking play the games,
you, man.
They play the games. They don't even paint the models. They barely read the fiction. They're just there, watching making lore videos on YouTube and thinking they know the entire IP. That's like, go fuck yourselves. But yeah, I think it's really interesting because like the because Games Workshop, like, love them or like them within the industry, they're the canary in the coal mine, essentially, because if they're doing well, then it reflects on the rest of the industry because people go like, well,
I mean, do you think so? Do you think that logic bears out, or are they?
I do, because
or are they just think like the fire that's sucking all the air out of the room. You gotta dampen it out before they suffocate you.
I don't think so, because I personally think, from a degree of experience, and also you only have to look at online and everything, I do think there is some sort of pathway of people that get into Games Workshop stuff then do look around at other things, and if they go into friendly local gaming stores, they will see other products out there and go, oh, okay, what's that?
I mean,
and then
I think that's an interesting point, and I actually I've been having this conversation, this sort of ongoing conversation with my buddy Chris from Slow Death Games, and he has the contention that yeah, you're right, like kind of like how a certain number of people are going to go see Disney movies as kids, and then they're going to become cinema majors or something, and they're going to go on to make actual like real movies, right?
Yeah.
That there's a certain number of people that are going to be introduced to miniatures gaming through Games Workshop and then move on to something else. But the real question is like, what is that percent? And like, how many people just equivocate Games Workshop gaming with miniatures gaming, when the fact is that these are two different things? There's miniatures gaming, and then there's people who play Warhammer, right?
Yeah.
And that's his contention, that there's miniatures gaming, and then there's people who play Warhammer. And I having worked in the role that I'm working in, I kind of see it now, because there's just guys, it doesn't matter what you hold in front of them. It doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah.
They just want to play 40K. That's all they want to do is just play 40K.
It's the same as D&D, right? It's the same as D&D. People
absolutely.
don't give a shit. But but the thing is, I guess it's that thing of like, even if it's a small percentage of people translate into sales in other games, a small percentage of a large cohort is better than a small percentage of a small cohort. So, you know.
I mean, I follow the logic. I don't necessarily know that I agree with it, because I feel like if the just entire miniatures game economy slash scene was at a smaller but sustainable level, right?
Mm.
Where the market share was more evenly distributed, I think that would be healthier. That's
Oh
just me.
yeah.
That's just my take. Like, just saying like, oh well, Games Workshop's gonna be like this behemoth, right? And it's going to be pushing out into like secret level animations, and there's gonna be some guy at your work who you meet at the water cooler, and now he knows about Warhammer, and now he's reading Horus Heresy books, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then there's what's left over, and everybody else has to divvy that up. Like, it wasn't like that when I started this hobby. It wasn't like that. And I feel like it was a healthier hobby. It was a healthier community. It was much
There were,
smaller.
yeah, I think there were, obviously it goes back to what Mike and I were talking about like last episode. There were, I think the competitors were properly more able, were competing on a more even playing field.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
like you know, Rackham were
Rackham.
putting, like Rackham. I mean, this is the thing. It comes back to my thesis of Rackham's art style and painting style. You can see in the DNA of the translation from 90s Games Workshop Golden Demon entries to 2000s,
Mhm.
because you see non-metallic metals come in. They're like,
Right.
oh, we suddenly got non-metallic metals. Like, they've been around since for fucking ages, thanks to like Rackham. Rackham was doing that in like 2003. Like, they were doing that before 2003. Their minis
Mhm.
looked great before it was all the rage and like, you know, golden fucking demon. And Privative Press, was at a point where it was competing with the popularity of, I wouldn't say as a company in the same scale, but at least the game was as popular. Yeah, I think, but then I think the reason why Games Workshop is where it is right now, or trying to do what it is right now, is clearly, I think they're clearly preparing to move to being like, they're not just a miniatures company, they're an IP company, in the
Right.
same way that,
Right. I mean, and
is
what we're
Marvel
talking
comic
about.
books? No, it's IP.
Well, yeah, exactly. And what we're talking about, right, and from a leftist perspective, is like the end of capital, right? We're like at the terminus of capitalism, right? Like,
Yeah,
the capital has expanded to fit the pond in which it grew. There's no more frontiers. The only frontier left is to monetize ideas, right? To
yeah,
monetize ephemera, right? Like, so NFTs, crypto, now we're moving into AI. How can we churn money? How can we somehow squeeze money out of literally nothing, right?
yeah.
And I I I don't love that. you know, I
Oh,
def I don't love that as an idea. The idea that somehow the the concept of Games Workshop is worth more than the reality of Games
yeah,
Workshop, if that makes sense.
yeah. But I do think there is a, I do think, yeah, I do think there is there is sort of a translation, like, because I think we're seeing, like, I just think that, and I said this to Mike, and I don't know, you mostly have more of an idea. And Mike had some anecdotal evidence, like, because of his friendly local gaming store, about, the popularity of 40k right now, or anything GW. Is, do you think, like, there's kind of a, like, GW's like release schedule, and again, like, they've put out updates, they had Grotmus and all that stuff, and
Right.
things, and they've got, they've had the LVO releases, preview, and like, we know what shit's coming out, like, there's going to be fucking Empress Children, Noise Marines stuff coming, but like, is the release cycle for those games like killing the enthusiasm for it for people that
So like
actually have the
GW
money?
fatigue.
Well, yeah, but is it because, I mean, is it ultimately because by the time you get around to painting an army, or you've got stuff you've got the new stuff ready for the army, your army's no longer even viable for the game because they've changed so much because they're catering to the tournament scene.
Well, I mean, like, I think that when you look at Games Workshop product, right? One of the things that you have, and you, especially their marketing, which by the way, their marketing is like super brilliant, and my hat is off to the marketing team
Oh yeah,
because like what what they've done, where they've sort of elevated the purchasing of Games Workshop product to a like quasi religious experience that like
yeah,
creates all of this fervor and dedication, and people who are like generally will sort of subsume their own best self-interest in favor of making sure that they have a model kit that they'll forget about in like 3 weeks. I mean,
yeah,
let us be clear that Games Workshop actually doesn't care if you build the model or paint the model or ever even play with the model. They
yeah,
just want you to buy the model. And
yeah,
I think that there is, since we're speaking about anecdotal evidence, I think that we can kind of we should point out that, and GW has alluded to this many times, right? That the game is not the point, right? Like
yeah,
there are those people who play the game at the most competitive level, and they are the noisiest, and it's easy to think that they are the scene, right? However, the vast sort of like iceberg principle majority of people who purchase the product do not play the game on that level, and they probably don't even play the game at all. They're probably just hobbyists who quietly paint the model and then put it on a shelf, and they don't go online and they don't scream and they don't even read the rule books. They don't care about the churning of the meta. The churning of the meta is something that is like designed for the most like internet brained people that engage with the hobby. And do I sense fatigue from them? No. Like
oh no,
in the game store, those guys are still as dedicated to Warhammer as they were like a year ago, right? When
yeah,
10th edition 40K seemed very hot and felt very hot. It was the Wild West era. However, there is that group of people who are like not just, fervent cultists, and they have largely moved on to other things, right? Like the other day I was running a 40K tournament in the store, and there were probably 6 people, 7 people in the shop playing games at the exact moment that the tournament was playing, who a year ago would have been in the tournament, but this year are like, no, I'm like, 2 people were building models for Marvel Crisis Protocol, two
mm,
people were playing Pokemon card game, 2 people were playing Flesh and Blood, um, because I mean, they're in terms of that incredibly high level engagement that GW basically requires out of you at this point, like
yeah,
it is not sustainable for your quote unquote like average gamer. You absolutely need those like highest point gamers in order to maintain it.
yeah, definitely. Hmm, interesting. So what is proving then to be kind of like popular in the store? What are people playing?
Well, I mean, like if I make a poster and it says Warhammer 40K on it, Warhammer 40K event, then I'm gonna sell a bunch of tickets to that event. I'm
Sure.
never not gonna sell tickets to that event. Um, Magic, I don't know. Magic's on a upswing right now. The last couple sets have been good, and this Foundations thing seems to be going well. There's a sort of strange reinterest in Pokemon that kind of surrounded the holidays, and I think it has to do with certain kind of internet-based externalities, but I'm not entirely sure. It's difficult when you're dealing with the card crowd because you never know if you're dealing with a person who plays the game or if you're dealing with like a quote unquote investor. And
Yeah.
if you're dealing with like these investor guys, they have a completely skewed way of looking at the game. They're like aliens. Um and so I don't ever really try to listen to them too much because they are very good at articulating to you what the reality of that exact moment that you are living in is. But then in like 5 minutes, if somebody does an article that says like, oh, the thing that was the big chase rare is no longer the chase rare, then the reality just changes. The
Hmm.
reality can just change based on an internet drop. um we've been doing really well with Flesh and Blood. Like Flesh and Blood, we kind of got into it at the end of 2023, and at that point it was sort of a side game that there was a lot of skepticism about, but Flesh and Blood seems to be entering into its golden age of just they've released something like 3 really good sets in a row, and they're getting ready to release a like all killer no filler set that has people just gibbering to get their hands on. So that's been cool to see. It's been cool to see
And
that.
this is Flesh and Blood's what, like a
Oh, it's a
card game?
TCG. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
card game.
okay.
It's a oh, you don't want to play Magic, but you want to have the experience of playing Magic that you maybe remember from 10, 20 years ago. Like here you go, you can play this instead.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's deliberately designed for that, because I mean honestly, like there's if I don't know what you know about Magic right now, but like dude, it is weird. That game is weird. If you played that game, if you played Magic like 15, 20 years ago, and then you like want to talk to someone about Magic now, it's just a completely different game. Like it's the same
Right.
cards and rules and shit, but it's a completely different game. It's bizarro. Um and then of course D&D, we sell a lot of D&D. You know,
Yeah.
sell a lot of D&D. I'm trying to push the other role playing games, trying to keep other stuff in the shop, but you know, you sell a lot of D&D. You know, you can't like you're always going to sell the hits. You're always going to sell the hits. We're just trying to occupy a place where we are uh inhabiting that mental space of curiosity and imagination, and giving people a place to land when they want to do it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of game stores here in Arizona. Like I track them because I'm a marketing knob. We have like 40 game stores in the
Fucking
Phoenix
hell.
metro area. I know, it's insane. And most of them have chosen a different marketing path, which is like only play the hits. Like we have the hits. And I think that that's a poverty, but you know,
Yeah.
I only get to manage one store. You know what I'm saying? So
So, I mean, I would say like at the at the gaming club, I feel there's at least diversity in what people play. You know, there are people that set up, you know, 6 foot by 4 foot tables of Warhammer, Age of Sigmar,
you mean
or
60 by
40k.
44
Yeah,
foot
whatever the fuck,
tables.
you know. But you know, people are playing Old World at the club, which is, I guess, good to see. That's
Is that actually
popular.
happening? Are people actually playing it?
Yeah, because people have brought their old armies out of storage, at least.
Great.
I mean, we'll talk about the LVO releases where I'll be like, yeah, that looks kind of janky by today's standards. And then, you know, I've run some demos and played some games of Warmachine. I'm running some Warmachine demos at an event next weekend. So at the gaming club, we've got a mini gaming con going on. So it's kind of like a bring and buy event, but also with participation games going on. So I'm running some Warmachine demos there. There's been Blood Bowl tournaments going on. Tournament that's been running. We've got my Necromunda campaign running. That's rumbling on. So I'm well behind on getting games in on it. So because as arbitrator, I just seem to have not been able to fit in games for myself. And then people play other things like, you know, the June. I see the June board game get played a lot, and things like that, and Magic and D&D and other things. So we get quite a lot of. I think there's enough diversity going on at the club that makes me think like, you know, it's skewed. If you know, if your only experience is like going to a gaming store, then I think you might get a skewed experience of what mostly is popular. But when you get to like clubs which aren't even tied to a store, that's when people bring out the weird stuff and show you what they're playing.
Like, hit me up. Help me understand this. So you guys have the club, and that you have the social hall, and it costs a fee to use the social hall, right?
So Crook Social Club has a event hall. So you know where you can have bands play, or you can host your wedding or whatever you want to. Then it has a bar. So classic, what would have been back in the day a men's club. and then that bar is big enough that it's got an area which is normally cordoned off with the movable walls. So you move those out of the way, and we take over that area with gaming tables. So we're literally right next. We're basically in the pub.
Okay.
Gaming.
Now, this costs a fee, right? This costs you, the individual members.
No.
Wait.
As long as everyone buys a pint, buys a drink.
So the economics of it is skewed into the alcohol.
Yeah.
Oh, so when you say it's a club, like, how is membership determined? Can anyone just show up, or do you have to pass
anyone can
process?
show up and game? The club maintains a collection of terrain and also board games that are either donated or bought using raffle money. Raffle money is the raffle prizes are either donated by local gaming stores, of which there are 3 in the city, or are donated by, or it's paid for. It pays for itself, as in you buy this thing, and then you make twice as much back on the raffle money, which means that you can buy something else, and it just proliferates and propagates. So you keep making more and more money, so that you can then save up for the next terrain purchase or gaming mat or whatever is needed for the club.
Who's in charge of the logistics of that? Like keeping track of the terrain, keeping track.
There is someone that's in charge of the club. Yeah, and then we are able to keep a certain amount of stuff on site at the social club.
And does that cost money? Does that, like, do you have to rent?
I don't think so. I think it's just such a long running agreement that it's just like, yeah.
See, this is like so crazy, because I really admire the way you guys do it over there, and I wish we had a similar, like, I wish we had any way to do that over here. But like in America, there's just no concept of like a public third place that isn't either outdoors, which is anathema to what we try to do, especially here in Phoenix. Like, you can't play games outside. That's insane. Like, you'll die. Or it's either outside or it's heavily privatized. Like every square foot of ground in America is somehow accounted for with ownership going to so-and-so, and then every time you want to do anything, there's somebody with their hand out. So it's like for instance, you're talking about, like, this is a space where bands play, or you could do weddings. If I was to go to a wedding venue and I'd be like, yeah, I want to have people here playing Warhammer, the cost would just break my back. There's just no way I could generate the revenue to do it. And then bands play in bars. So if I went to a bar and I was like, okay, let's not have a band, let's have people playing Warhammer, then they would have to generate, again, as much, kind of like what you were saying, as much revenue off the bar as they would off of a band. And I don't know, maybe, I guess because you're probably doing that on a weeknight, right? Like, you're not, it's not like Saturday night, right? The bands and the weddings are there on Saturdays and Sundays, right?
Exactly, yeah. Okay,
I might be able to do something like that at a bar, but it would be hinky, and they would give me a look. They'd be like, I don't know about this, man. You're weird.
And I guess in the UK we've got quite a lot of, like, I guess we just have, there's Sheffield in particular has a lot of these, what would have been back in the day, men's clubs, because they would have been established as, like, these, as you say, these social clubs, third spaces for people that used to work in the either at the steel mills or in work at, like, the coal mines. And those spaces were, it's socialist essentially. It's there to exist for the local community, because the community doesn't have the means to to hire out more luxurious wedding venues or a venue that's required for, like, a wake for someone's funeral or something like that.
So what you're saying is that these institutions come from worker solidarity, which is not something that we have in America. In America, we have VFWs, which are veterans of foreign wars, and so they're for soldiers. And sometimes, and of course, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but, like, it's interesting because in America, the people who probably are the most anti-socialist while also behaving in the most socialist manner are our veterans. They they have all these socialist institutions and they use the shit out of them, and then they vote against socialism like at every opportunity. But like
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I get it.
they have that. You guys have that too?
I think maybe less so because like, I think there is a more socialist bent. Like this, I think the military people that don't, that aren't just like officers, kind of like gone through officer training in that sense. I think therefore come from a working class background. They come off like welfare and go
Sure.
into the army because it's a
Mm-hmm.
better life in that respect. But yeah, we've got third spaces like that. I mean, the other type of third spaces we have would be back where I used to live. So you would have town and village halls that you could, I say hire out, but again, it would be for a nominal fee because the whole point of these spaces is to serve the community.
Right.
And
It's
then,
supported by taxpayer dollars. We don't even
yeah,
have anything like that. There's like literally like I live in a town in Arizona called Tempe, and it's part of the greater Phoenix metro area. And there's no like Tempe social hall. Like if
no,
I went to the Tempe social hall and I was like, if it say it did exist, I was like, hey, how much would it cost to like have Warhammer here? They would again name some price that would just like it would impoverish me. So the entirety of our gaming culture is funneled into either the game store, right, which
yeah,
has to be a sort of like capitalist arrangement. The game store owner has to make some money in order for this thing to work for them. Because like I know this at this point. I know the numbers that these
yeah,
people pay for rent, and that number would knock your socks off. By the way, it would knock your
right.
fucking socks off. Or you just funnel it into somebody's house, which at that point it's a walled garden and there's like no chance of it ever growing, you
Yeah.
know?
And I mean, the other spaces, again, that work out as being like social spaces. And I think this is because they, again, a small fee to use them, but then, you know, it's only a small fee. It's only like paying like £1 or £2 to attend.
That's fucking nuts, dude.
Is
Dude, you're
it
fucking blowing my mind. Nothing
is
costs £1 or £2 over here, man.
would be the other places would be like the church halls. So because there's such a drop
Mm-hmm.
in attendance and of people to, let's just say, for the most part it's going to be Church of England, right? That means their third space, their halls, which they would use again for events and weddings for people back in the day who were associated with the church and actually were church goers. Well, now there's like, well, we've got to maintain that space. What do we do? So down where I live, there's a church nearby that has a hall, and that hall on one night is running. Is a space that's used for kickboxing. On another night, it's used as a space for Tai Chi. On another night, it's used for some other event. So again, and then every so often it's used as like a retro gaming arcade. So it's this,
that blows my mind.
and so
That
it's
blows my
there to be
mind.
used. So, and they're not, and again, like I think it's that thing of like, they're not even expecting you to go along to those things and then go, hey, you're doing taekwondo. Have you heard of the good news? They're
Right.
just like, thanks for coming. We appreciate you like this space. You've paid this fee to attend the event you're doing. That helps us maintain this space, and we understand that. Well, this space was originally for Church of England goers to this church. Ultimately, this space, historically, its primary purpose, no matter what it was doing, has been to serve the community, and that's what it keeps doing.
Yeah.
So it's just a translation. Well, it's just kind of like pivoting on what its role is and just widening it out, which is fine. Everyone wins.
There's no sense of that in the United States. It's like everything, like because we have churches and churches have halls.
Yeah, but they're not going to let you in if you're not a follower, right?
Exactly. That's the thing, right? Is that we know that those are the inexpensive ones. Like we could potentially get a toehold there, but the only way to get access to them is if you're part of one of their congregations, and if you come up to them and you say, hey, I want to use it, I'm not part of the congregation, they're going to be very skeptical. You're going to have to really pass some kind of weird litmus test. And then part of that litmus test is, what is the content of the event that will be happening here, and does that align with our messaging? And so, like, for instance, you said Tai Chi, which I won't even get into, like, oh, we're going to bring Warhammer 40K down and we're going to have a bunch of people like with like their demon toys. We're not even going to talk about that. Like, I'm talking about Tai Chi. Like, you try to do that in an American church, and I guarantee you there will be someone in the congregation who is like, Tai Chi is heretical. And why is our congregation supporting Tai Chi, which is like pagan or something? I'm not even kidding. This would happen.
Yeah. And then I'm about to link you so you can look on Facebook for this one, right? So this is one of the local game stores. They've now moved from one venue to their new venue, which used to be a motorcycle showroom.
Oh, dope.
And so this gaming space is, if you look at the gaming space, like in the most recent post, that's for an event that's being run by Hellstorm Mike for is a tournament. But if it wasn't for a tournament, it's otherwise free to play there.
This is cool advertising.
Like, that space is huge and free to play. They even have a quiet room for people that want to run board games or RPGs and not be invaded by the noise of the wargamers and CCG gamers. So there's also a space. There's also tables dedicated for collectible card games.
Look at all that square footage, man. Yeah, it's
fucking insane, isn't it?
It really is. No, that's very nice. I mean, we have some nice spaces here in America. But then, I mean, that gets into a whole nother question as to, like, well, what should a space be like, and what should the experience of being in a space be like? And you know, you get there's a lot of different answers to what seems like a very simple question.
Sorry, I was just looking at the tournament pictures, of course, because it's a 40K tournament. I'm just like, yeah, that's great terrain, but also, like, it's all just L-shaped fucking ruins.
Oh, dude, don't get me fucking started on this. Don't get me started on this fucking 40K app that, like, where there's like I guess GW actually put out an app that has tournament terrain, like, placement guidelines for all the various L's that you need to put down. And dude, they are so jank. Like, I only learned about this from some kids who showed up to one of my events, and then they started getting pugnacious with another player who wasn't, like, dialed in to the, like, competitive scene in the way they were. And they were like, no, we got to set up the terrain like this app. And the guy, he comes over and he's like, they're telling me I need to set up the terrain like this app. So I come over, I'm like, what the fuck are you even talking about? Like, because I have the 40K app and I have the Age of Sigmar app, and there's no fucking terrain on either of those. And then they bust out this thing, and they're like, no, this is the official tournament terrain layouts. And I'm like, first of all, no, I don't care about that. We're not doing that. This is not an official 40K tournament. This is supposed to be fun. Just make a board that looks cool, looks kind of neat, okay? That's A. Like, B,
right.
If you look at the way these terrain that they tell you to set up the terrain, you can see it in some of these pictures. Like, it's just this completely abstracted jank where it's like there would not be any streets in this city. There would not be any kind of focal points. It's just geometric shapes that have been dropped onto a plane. You know what I'm saying?
Right, exactly. It's a tower defense game. It's it's a computer game that's been where they've gone, right, we need a map. It needs to be fair, no matter which end you were on.
Right.
Fine. Fuck it, we do this. And it has, and because of that, it has no fucking narrative.
Right. Yeah. Oh, the narrative has been, like, pretty well. I mean, I don't know if there ever was a narrative.
You shouldn't be expecting narrative at a tournament, though. Let's be honest. If you're going into a tournament, you shouldn't expect narrative. But I will say, it just sucks the vibes out looking at all these terrain setups.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, like, are there vibes in 40K anymore, or is it just basically people dealing with a math abstraction? And largely, 40K is a math abstraction at this point. The people who play it like it's a math abstraction. It's I've found engaging with that game in particular to be very unfun lately. I play Age of Sigmar. Age of Sigmar is a little bit better. But even then, in the new General's Handbook, that one does come with terrain layouts for the specific missions that they put for you in that book. And it does say in the rules, oh, well, you don't have to use them, but you can. Here's some suggestions. But like the second you give these guys suggestions, that might as well just be the gospel truth. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
You can't get away from it. Or it's very difficult to get away from it.
Yeah. It's funny you say about the abstraction of maths, because something I'm writing currently for my own blog, because I was just like, fuck it, let's do it, because is an introduction to it. I'm going to do a series of introductions to the fundamentals of Warmachine, like how to not these are the rules, because there's a very good app with a well-written rule book in there. Like Warmachine's fucking I would say Warmachine is not obtuse in how it writes its rules and how you understand how the game operates. Whereas, I just can't get into 40k. I just, and it proves it's
you can't get into 40k. Don't even try reading Kill Team. There are some really bonkersly written rules in Kill Team.
Well, then there's Necromunda, which has the worst rules. Like the I don't say it's the worst rules, but I think it's just the order in which they present certain rules in the rule book doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's a different matter. But it's like, who cares? It's a role play game, so I don't fucking care.
Right.
But so I'm going to do a series of articles looking at the fundamentals. So the first one I've done is just about dice rolls in Warmachine, because I think it then lays out why it doesn't feel so swingy compared to 40k and Age of Sigmar and anything that just relies on rolling a bucket of d6. Because essentially it boils down to you can make in 40k. I think there's a lot of stuff like, oh, you roll this bucket of d6 and it can feel like with a bad batch of rolls or a bad batch of how many d6 roll that you do, you could suddenly get a lot of fails or a lot of ones, or you can suddenly get a lot of successes and also a lot of sixes, and it can just suddenly feel like things oscillate quite rapidly. Like, sure, everything evens out over time.
Over the history of your gaming, it will even out. But
sometimes it feels in that moment, it just feels like really extreme.
Yeah.
And I think Warmachine doesn't quite have that issue, because the dice roll system is about rolling everything rolls off a 2d6. So, you can eyeball it and being like, well, on average, you're always going to roll, a 6, 7, 8. You're always kind of in that ballpark for the most part. Like percentage wise, you're always going to be rolling that, and it means then I feel like there's meaningful things you can do with the dice system that people who are new to it don't understand or haven't had spelt out, which is about like whether you get a flat buff of, like, say you're rolling your 2d6 plus if we say it's the attack value of your model versus the defense of the target, and then you get a further modifier, which is like, you get +2 to hit because you've aimed your gun, so you get +2 to hit. Like, you can understand how that shifts your averages. Or if you get a boost, so you get an extra d6 into your dice pool, so now you're rolling 3d6, you've shifted your average by 3.5, and also you've got a slightly wider gamut of guaranteed area of, you're going to always roll roughly about, a score between this range on average, and you've also increased that upper limit of what you could potentially get. So you could roll incredibly high, because now your maximum value is more like rather than 12 is like 18. So I think what I'm basically trying to get in the article is, like, because of how that system works, there are really meaningful choices you can do about going, like, well, do you spend a focus point to boost your attack on this one model, or should you be casting a spell on the target so all your army gets a flat buff against it, so you've made that target easier to hit or easier to damage?
I mean, I take your point. I think that's a strong point, but I mean, we're still talking about a bell curve here, right?
Oh yeah,
and so you're still vulnerable to spiking. Like,
spiking's vulnerable, and I think it's almost a feature in some respects, where you go, I'm going to take the risk of this attack on the chance that if I hit, I could then boost the damage roll in the hope I will get the spike to do the damage. But the odds of that spike is really low because it's off a 3d6.
I mean, I think that like people. I mean, I don't know. You can kind of tell when people are like crutching on the spike when they need the spike.
Oh yeah.
To carry them, right? And sometimes, and this is the thing that's frustrating about playing GW games just in general, is that sometimes it feels like if your opponent is spiking or if you're spiking in a particular direction on armor saves or something, like say it's not that you're like making crazy successes when you shouldn't be, you're making crazy failures when you shouldn't be, right? Like that can feel like it doesn't matter what you do, you're just like a slave to the dice, you know?
Yeah.
And so like I because spikes are just completely improbable and you have no way of predicting them, like I just don't think that there's like a way to factor for them, right? You're always going to be in that spot where it's like if someone's lucking out on you, then what are you going to do? It's a dice game, you know what I'm saying? And we all have to kind of shrug our shoulders, and that's why we shouldn't get too salty about the outcomes of any of these particular things. But it's still a feel bad moment, you know what I'm saying? It's a feel bad moment.
Yeah.
When the thing that quote unquote shouldn't happen but could happen does, you know?
Yeah. I just feel like in Warmachine you can make some choices to go, that's unlikely to happen, but I'm doing something that will increase the chance of it occurring, or at least making really high values now suddenly become more probable because you've got an extra d6 in there. Or how critical hits work in Warmachine is if you roll a double. So if you beat the defense value and you've rolled a double as the attack roll, that counts as a critical hit. So obviously if you roll 3 dice, or if you're lucky enough in the game there are opportunities where you're actually rolling 4 dice, as long as you get a double occur in that dice roll, you've got a critical. So it kind of makes it a meaningful choice trying to push your odds on that.
Yeah. I mean, sure. And I think that like when you start getting the people, because there will doubtlessly be a like a tournament meta for the game.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's emerged yet, but if given time, if the game is successful, it will. And the people who will champion that version of the game will be the people who will be like, I don't care about spikes in either direction. The only thing I care about is what I can make happen super, super consistently. And they will try what and this is kind of the thing that is sort of interesting about Warhammer game design, that they kind of moved away from a little bit in 10th edition. And I think that there were a lot of competitive players in 9th who were disillusioned with 10th because the way that stratagems and stuff, like stratagems and auras, you could layer those things in such a way in 9th to make certain outcomes all but guaranteed. Like you had to really be having a bad day in order to not make a thing happen. And at that point, it was ceasing to become Warhammer and it was starting to become something else, right? And they've in the latest edition they've tried to factor against that. But the more you have tournament players and the more the tournament scene is a cauldron of consistency, and then the more those tournament players broadcast that style of thinking via the internet to like kids who just want to stomp face against their buddies at the local club or whatever, the more you're going to see that mentality kind of communicating itself like a virus, you know?
Yeah.
When everybody approaches the game like that, the game becomes super like weirdly unfun. You know?
Here's an idea, because like, it's one of these things where you've got casual players who just want to play a game,
right?
And then you've got people, and it's that whole thing of like, and this is the problem I think with GW updating the rules all the time. It's like you've got that rub of, I'm a casual player, I've gone to the local club or store to play a game. The only people available to play are totally into the tournament scene and meta, so they're always on the ball of the rules edition, whereas I'm like 2 cycles out of date of rule errata. So I arrived, my army is like out of date. My army's not even legal or something like that. But something I was thinking of, like that's a problem. But the other thing I was thinking of with like tournament play and what we were talking about, the boards and stuff, is, do you think there is do you think should there be in tournament play, and therefore also just in general? Like, I think it's fine. I think for casual games and narrative games, people are more than happy to do it. Should there not be? I guess it's that thing of can you have in tournaments scenarios which are asymmetric, as in the board is not symmetric and your win conditions are not symmetric, and you just have to go with the luck of the draw of like, I've got drawn against this player, and by chance we're on this board with this mission, and it's not ideal, but I just have to suck it up and carry on.
Yeah, you can have that if you are fine absorbing the like high-pitched scream that comes out of the tournament players that show up, because tournament players hate that. Tournament players tournament players feel like the game should be this like very finely balanced instrument in which like success is probable from all angles. And I would say that asymmetry is actually the hallmark of the miniatures wargamer and not the Warhammer player. At least not the new Warhammer player. I remember a long time ago, people were much more like, it's funny. I think sometimes I look at things through rose-colored glasses. I get a little nostalgia weepy about things. Like, somebody was reminding me recently that like there's always the Warhammer community has always felt like it's full of kind of power gamey jerks, even when we were kids. But like, I do genuinely seem to remember a time when people felt a little bit more imaginative and like interested in exploring some of the potentials of the game, and a little less concerned with making everything just a math problem that balances out on both sides before you begin. And I think that when GW released Age of Sigmar 1, about 10 years ago now, just about, they really were trying an experiment to drive Dagger into the heart of the tournament scene. They wanted to see if they could do it. And what ended up happening was those guys, they basically just were like, well, if you're not going to give us one, we'll just make one. And at that point, it was easier to go along and get along. So what you are like proposing, I don't think is possible if you are going to orient your game around tournaments, which Games Workshop seems to have chosen that it's going to do.
It's interesting because there is a game that there are a couple of games that Games Workshop makes that obviously have asymmetry built in.
Sure.
And, people do sort of run tournaments for. You can run it as a tournament. It'd be really
like
weird.
Necromunda?
Necromunda is innately asymmetric. Like
innately, and you should never run a tournament for it. It's not designed for that. Like at all.
And then the other one is, I think, is Warcry, because again, in the back of the war, even with the terrain layouts and deployment layouts in the back of the Warcry rulebook, which are designed apparently for more tournament play, even the pick of you still have to randomize. You have to randomize what's the board, what's the deployment positions, then what the mission is, and then what the twist is. So those combination of four things, coupled with the fact of, well, this is my warband, that's yours, shit can get really asymmetric quite quickly. And I feel that's why people love Warcry as a game out of the Games Workshop stable, because it is so asymmetric. It can be asymmetric in its in essentially what you're having to play because of what's been randomized. And the other thing that's interesting, going back to what we were saying about dice pools with Warmachine and that thing, is how combat is resolved in Warcry. Remember, you're rolling, you go, right, I attack you, my attack dice is 4 versus your, and I've got a strength of like 4, your defense is 3, so I'm needing to roll 3s. And if any of these roll a 3 or more, I cause damage, and if I roll a 6, I cause critical damage. So you take the other damage value. So again, that game has a sense of like, on average, things in the wash, average out. But then you can do things in that game where you can go, well, if I play this ability, I get more dice on my attack. Therefore, I will have a greater chance of spiking my pull, getting 6s and dealing critical damage, or you go, well, if I do this thing, I increase the strength of my attack, and therefore I'm more consistently hitting and therefore causing damage. So weirdly, I think it was while I was having a shower, I was like, actually, was Warcry in the Games Workshop stable, the game that they created, more similar to Warmachine because of how you make the choices of how you interact with the dice.
I mean, that's interesting. Like, I haven't played Warcry, but from your description, it has a lot of DNA that's very similar.
You
similar
should
to
play
Kill
it.
Team.
It's
I mean, that's what
great.
everybody says to me. I mean, what I was expecting them to cancel it because of what they did with Age of Sigmar, where they relegated like a ton of its models, and then they kind of integrated its models into Age of Sigmar. But what I've kind of seen is I suspect that we just have a new edition coming because they have
the rules
this
are free anyway.
They have this new way of marketing their little skirmish games by embedding the units that you buy for the skirmish games into armies, for their respective armies. So for instance, like in 40K, there are all these units that you absolutely want to take and need to build your 40K army, but they're actually kill teams. And then they only, rather than offering those boxes as both a kill team box and as a unit box, they only offer it as the kill team box.
Yeah.
Which is so, and they're doing that with Warcry also. There's like a bunch of stuff that like very desirable units for your Age of Sigmar army that are packaged in Warcry boxes. So I suspect probably this summer we'll be seeing like a new Warcry edition or something. So at which point I'll probably check it out, because the Kill Team, the latest Kill Team edition that just came out.
Yeah.
I mean, the game's, first of all, the game's totally bent and utterly imbalanced. They definitely didn't give it anything more than the cursory read through before they released it. But I will say, if you bought that Hive Storm box, there's this great book in it, the Hive Storm narrative playbook or whatever the fuck it's called. It has a series of linked missions that you can play in a tree that are completely asymmetrical. Each one is very themey, and they are all super fun. They are just super fun. And then I thought that they were going to release another one of those books with the Brutal and Cunning expansion.
Yeah.
And they didn't. It just has the rules for the Ratlings and the fucking orcs in it, which kind of pisses me off, because they have a real opportunity in both Kill Team and Warcry, it sounds like, to continue what was the sort of like heritage, the legacy of Games Workshop, which was fun and engaging narrative play inside of this beloved world, which, as we started out talking about, has turned into this crazy IP that people genuinely want to be a part of. But I think people end up feeling kind of isolated from when it just becomes a big math problem.
I have played the previous iteration of the current version of Kill Team, so back when it had shapes, and I did enjoy it. Like, I was using the Adeptus Arbites, and they were quite fun and characterful. So I will.
The cops,
once I finish,
bro?
Huh?
The cops?
Yeah.
You playing the space cops?
the feds.
Come on now. Come on now. Fuck those guys.
Because I've got like about 6 Kill Team sets or war bands.
Yeah. Me
so
too.
I just need to play more, but I keep getting dragged into. Well, I keep running Necromunda.
Keep getting sucked into the games you love and that you're passionate about.
And Warmachine is just easy to play. Like, it's bloody easy to play. Right.
So we're kind of getting to the ends. My time's running out. So I have a question for you.
I
have a question for you before I dip out. So we're in 2025, and 2024 was kind of like the year that 2 miniatures games kind of asserted themselves onto the scene as being kind of like the right coded miniatures game that you and your friends want to play, right? And there was 2 of them. Okay, we had Trench Crusade and all of its kind of like, the art is very right coded, and there's a bunch of sort of like culture war stuff going on in that scene as to who's going to get to play it and who's going to get to be in charge of it. And then over here in America, we have Blackout, okay, which, while it has no official ideology associated with it, There is a certain kind of like cynicism to the way that the models are presented and the environment is presented that feels utterly dystopian, very kind of transgressive. It gives me all the kind of transgressive horror vibes that I used to get from GW, which, by the way, is also what Trench Crusade does. As GW has become like just this increasingly safe, known quantity, people who want that thrill of an edgy game that kind of takes you out of yourself a little bit are looking for other things. So, Chris, what is your right coded game of choice going into 2025? Since we're all gonna have to play one, we're all gonna have to play
Trench
one.
Crusade. I'm playing Trench Crusade. It's that simple.
All right.
I've read the rules, and it's again, it's dice pool system. It's 2d10. It's easy to get your head round, and I think looking at Blackout, I think it's got a tough uphill battle against Infinity.
Yeah, I mean, these are Infinity guys that have made the game. It's just I mean, I think Infinity is in a weak spot. I look at Infinity, which has just came out with a new edition, N5, and I feel like Infinity has not been this weak in like a decade. Like I feel like Infinity is struggling to maintain its base. And I don't know that like necessarily Infinity players are going to come over and join and start playing Blackout, but I think that Blackout has a big has a lot of upside potential. We recently started stocking this in the shop, and buddy, I can't keep it in stock. It flies.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, I think that eventually, when the Trench Crusade stuff becomes available, we'll stock that, and that will fly too. And of course, it'll be a much bigger hit than this.
STLs are out to backers. I'm awaiting. I don't have a printer, so I'm waiting for my prints to come through for it. So, and I've got proxies I need to paint up and start playing it with.
See, man, the fact that you're saying the word proxy like right now, it just hurts my heart. Like, I was interested. I had interest in Trench Crusade when it was the cool hobbyist game. It was like going to be it was the Kit Bashers game.
Yeah.
And then they were like, we're doing a big Kickstarter. I was like, yay, that's great. And they were like, and it's going to have official models. And the second I heard the word official models, my heart just sank into my stomach.
But
and
that's
because what go ahead.
No, I think the reason I say proxies is because Trench Crusade technically is miniature agnostic.
I mean, yeah, technically, but that's a technicality that's going to be obliterated.
It promotes itself as miniature agnostic. You can use any range of miniatures to represent your fighters for it. It actually says that, and you can convert them as you like, and that's why they're teaming up with third-party production of miniatures.
Sure.
So there are other companies making stuff. So it's a completely different. It's a different model to how you go. Games Workshop. These are our models. You must play with those models. At home, you can do what the fuck you want. Trench Crusade is you go to a Trench Crusade tournament, doesn't matter whether they're the Trench Crusade models, they can be from any producer that goes, these are thematically Trench Crusade, you've converted them to be Trench Crusade, they're third-party licensed Trench Crusade, or they're Trench Crusade. You can be anywhere in between, mix and match, whatever you want.
That is where GW started. So that's not completely new. That's just the old GW model, which was, hey, we don't care, just have fun. Yeah. And then over time, everything became very strictly licensed, strictly IP'd, strictly policed. And what bothers me is that because gamers, right? And I'm about to deliver a hot take, okay?
Hey.
And this is definitely gonna get me in trouble. Gamers, your average gamer, not your like top end, bleeding edge, the married to the life gamer, but your average gamer is not a particularly creative person.
No.
They will take what is served to them, and they will identify it with a sort of, again, a religious like devotion to like, oh, is it what is in the book? Is that the same as what's in the book? That's why you get people like quibbling over paint schemes and stuff. Like, oh, that's not a real Soul Drinker's paint scheme. You know what I'm saying? It's like, who cares, right? So the second that the Trench Crusade people introduced models that had the word official on them, I was like, okay, this is over. Because we're living in accelerated times. You should have seen how fast the adoption of Trench Crusade took place in the shop once the concept of official models was put into the bloodstream. Because once it becomes I go into the STL store and I hit print, that language is going to start eating away and corroding the creativity, and it already has begun. It doesn't matter what they to me it doesn't matter what they write in the book. It's just a matter of time before you show up and you're like, oh, here's my Black Grail guys or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, that's not gonna work. This is the official one. It's just a matter of time.
Right. I'm gonna quickly go through LVO GW releases of what I give a shit about and what I don't, and we'll just and I'll get hot takes. So, new Soulblight stuff, Gravelords, cool mini. They're wicked. I think they're all great. The thing that most interests me is what they call the Barrow Guard. Because they're basically just Graveguard. They're new Graveguard.
Right. They're renaming Graveguard.
And you know how Curse City came out and it had the new style skeleton warriors?
Yeah.
And then one of the expansions goes, oh, to use this expansion, you need these kits. And you're like, okay, I'll get the direwolves. Cool, fine. I'll get the giant bats. Cool, fine. And then it says, you need a box of Graveguard. And I looked to the Graveguard models like, get the fuck out of town. No way. They look jank as shit compared to these new skellies. Now, they've got Graveguard that I will buy to finish the Curse City collection. I've got.
They had you stealth by a Soulblight army, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's true. So I've got a Soulblight army, which is fine. Well, I say Soulblight army. I've got a Soulblight for Warcry because, like, fucking playing Age of Sigmar anytime soon. So I think that's cool from that end. I think everything else to do with Soulblight, like that new Zombie Dragon, is like fucking shit.
Amaze balls. It's amaze balls. That new line is all killer, no filler. They are wrecking me over there. I want the new Gloomspite Wolf Riders, and then they come out with this Soulblight like right on its heels. Like, come on, guys, give me a break. Let my wallet rest. I'm in pain over here. Anyway.
They've got some Black Library tie-in characters for Cadia, which are just like, okay, if I actually read the book,
fest.
Like, who cares? Ulth1, it's just like, okay, we've got Monkey Hands back.
Didn't even click on it.
It's just high elves as you've known them.
Yep.
They've got a few new models on foot for things. They've redesigned the Illyrian Reavers though. Those are brand new models.
That's kind of cool.
So that's good. And they're bringing back all the other plastic kits. So it's just it is what you expect. It's not groundbreaking, but fine if that's
known
your
quantity.
jam.
We've been here before, ladies and gentlemen.
We've got new Ash Wastes models for the Ash Waste Nomads, which are looking quite cool. So there's a new box of warriors, some new Griblies. They can command a weapons option box, and we've got a book that's going to be out, which is Tribes of the Wastelands. So we're basically getting a House of the, it's a gang book for Ash Wastes. So I think that's pretty cool.
But it'll have generic guys in it, you think? Kind of like the Outcasts book? Do you think it'll be similar to that?
No, I think it's going to be, it's a gang book. I think it's like the Orlok book. It's instead, though, you're going to be able to flavor your Ash Waste Nomads depending upon which totem they follow. So I think that's cool because it means I think we'll see the equivalent done for Enforcers. Because again, there's a lot of stuff for the Enforcers that are spread over about 2 or 3 books that need to be collated together. And that's what these gang books always do eventually. They turn up about a year or 2 down the line and collate a lot from campaign books and stuff and, add some new stuff in at the same time.
Dude, I'm sorry. Here we go. Here's a little hot take. I know that I'm always dogging on the GW 3-year edition cycle, and I do not like it, but Necromunda needs an actual new edition. Like we are in the N17 edition, and I know that they've been releasing like 0.5s and patches and
the most recent rule book is the new edition.
But it needs to be like a comprehensive new edition that
what sense does the rule book
resets the whole thing.
In what sense?
There's so much interacting stuff.
Because we've got the new rule book. We've got the new rule book, right? Which resolved a lot of weird things with like some of and enhanced the rules in places, like with how injuries work and experience works and so forth. And then we have the house books, which collated a lot of shit from before the new book that was spread over things. So effectively, we are into the new edition of Necromunda.
Yeah, but you see, that's like effectively. I think that
Yeah,
there needs to be
I
an
think
actual. There needs to be like a because we're getting on 10 years. Maybe in 27 they need a or 8 years ish now, where it's like they need a like okay, this is the new edition, and they need to iron out the in the hive, out of the hive, vehicles, not vehicles. How do enforcers really work? And what
what
book
do you
like
mean with how
because
enforcers really work? You mean as
the
in
yeah, like right now, enforcers are spread out over a bunch of books. There's a bunch of well, if this, then that. If this, then maybe something else. You have to agree upon it. Like it's
the
it's
only
it's
thing that you
it's
have
an
to
amoeba.
resolve for
It's not an
the only
amoeba. It's
thing
an
that's wrong
octopus.
for enforcers is that in a standard Necromunda campaign, by the rules, they cannot take territories.
Right.
That is pretty much across the board is ignored by everyone that plays campaigns. If you
Which
play
is
any other campaign type, they work perfectly fine. It's just that's a holdover because their book where they came out, which was the book of
judgment
law,
or some shit.
the book of judgment, yeah, came out about I want to say over 5 years ago.
It's a bit now.
So it is. So this is what I mean. It needs to. They basically need to collate that. So it's a house book. So it's like the Orlok book and like the Ashwaste Nomads book and like the recent Squat book that came out. Once they do that, everything is then fully up to date.
I guess. I mean, I think this is one of the things where you and I just have to agree or disagree because to me,
Yeah.
I'm just like, I feel like you make my case for me when you're like, well, everybody just ignores that rule. It's like, yeah, but if
I mean, it's
today
just
is the first day of me buying the book, then how do I fucking know that? You know what I'm saying? And that's the
because you go
problem
on
with that game.
you go on like Necroroar and Yak Tribe, and
Yeah, but you shouldn't have to
you
go
shouldn't
on
have
Yak
to. I
Tribe.
know.
You should have
Yeah.
to just pick up the book, and the book explains
I'm amazed
itself.
it's not been errated anyway. That rule, like away, it hasn't been dealt with in an errata.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just so much vestigial stuff inside of that game. That is the one game that actually needs them to sit down
I will
open up a Word document.
I honestly say, if you get the big Necromunda rulebook, right, and you've got your house book, say you're playing Orloks, you have everything to play the game.
Are the vehicle rules in the main book?
Yes.
All of them.
All the vehicle rules are in the main book. And if you get the Orlok book, all your vehicles are in there.
All your Orlok vehicles.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
That's what I mean. It's just they're slowly collating everything that's come out in campaign books into those things. The campaign books still have value because you've got those specific campaigns in there. The ways of running those campaigns and the narrative scenarios, they still have value. It's not like how Games Workshop goes, hey, we've done the errata on this rule book like for the 10th time now, so that Space Marine book is just like not even worth the paper it's printed on.
Right.
Necromunda, I feel like you get collations, but still old books still have value because there's like there are scenarios in there which you go, well, they've not reprinted that yet because there's just not enough space to reprint all these things.
And as you said previously, it is a role playing game. It's best taken as a role playing game, and like in role playing heads know you don't throw out your old books. No. There's always something in the old book that doesn't make it to the new book.
And then I'm just looking at the other releases. There's some AdMech fucking thing. They're doing Beastman.
Dude, fucking Heresy has turned into such a snooze fest.
Yeah.
I have no idea who's in charge of that line development, but my God, it is the cure for insomnia. The new Beastman looks rad. He is awesome. And then let's just tackle it. The Emperor's Children. What do you think?
I think they look cool.
I find them boring.
There's some interesting like designs we've not seen for a while. I mean, they don't. I think again, it's like they're what I expect from a modern 40k miniature of Emperor's Children. Exactly. It's like I'm not shocked. Like Noise Marines look like Noise Marines. And I think the most interesting models maybe are the what are they called? The
Paladin
they call the perfected perfected blades. The dudes with swords, and they've got like kind of elongated
the 8-bound
heads
that are the Slanesh 8-bound.
Yeah. I think those are the most interesting because they look the weirdest.
Yeah. I think that this whole line is basically a miss, and that's just because kind of what you were alluding to, which is They've learned their own language. They've perfected their own language, and now everything is a known quantity. This looks exactly like what we would expect them to release a Noise Marine army to look like. It's very unexciting. I remember when the Wood Elves army dropped for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and it blew my fucking mind because there just never had been anything like that ever before. And here we are, like 20 years later, and I'm just never going to experience that again because they know what the formula is, and they just have it on repeat now.
What's the shelf life for the codex then? You're going to give it like 2 months before it's errata to oblivion?
Oh no, there will probably be a problem that will cause it to be negated before release date.
Yeah.
The YouTubers will find something in it, man.
The other things, because I've got my Trench Crusade stuff, so I'm going to be I'm basically going to prime it, and maybe tomorrow, so I can then slap chop the fuck out of it. But on a related note, the John Blanche paint sets for doing grimdark stuff looks quite interesting. Or at least it's inspired me to look at the paints I've got to use the same color palettes.
Sure.
So that's cool. I'm highly biased. I'm looking forward to the Signar Colossal when I can afford it, because it looks wicked. And then the other thing is, I haven't yet dabbled in it, but I'm preparing to do so. Again, going back to the fact that I'm going to slap chop some Trench Crusade, is my mate Mark got his old Warmachine 3rd edition Crick starter set put together. And he did oil washes on it, so it's got the Cricks with white armor, and he oil washed it, and they look freaking great for what work he did on it.
That sounds rad.
So that whole oil wash thing, I think in Warmachine, do it. I think in particular for certain armies, I think it would look really, really good. And
I do think Warmachine is begging to be grimdark painted.
I think that's something. It's interesting you say that. I think Warmachine, I feel, because you can have trench battles, because the setting, you've got trenches and chain gunners and so forth like that, but then you've also got the kind of more very fantastical elements of it. I think the minis actually, because they're not really festooned with loads of detail as well, like they're not like a skull on every fucking armor plate.
Right.
I do think they do take well to different paint styles. Like you could go for you could go quite anime and really nice clean colors, but then you could go, if I just put oils on it, I've got these large armor plates, which you get really interesting, like mottling and weathering effects. So
yeah. Because if you look at like an industrial scale truck, right, there's a lot of broad planes on it, right? And then the way that weathering and streaking can occur, like because of exposure to elements, like you could definitely do that with Warmachine. It would look awesome. It would look super awesome.
And then to finally wrap up, what are you looking forward to in your hobby this year? Then, what do you want to do?
So I've gotten weirdly into Blackout. I've gotten weirdly into Blackout. So I got a Harlow Kinetic Solutions army, and I'm currently just because the range for each army is very small. So my goal right now is to just have everything for Harlow, everything, all the robots, all the expansions, everything. And then I'm building a board for Blackout, and the board is actually fully painted. I used those secret weapon tiles, the plastic tiles that they had. I had a set from before Secret Weapon went out of business, and so I've built, and I have fully painted a 4x4 board from their scrapyard tiles. And I'm building a little kind of science fiction favela for them to be fighting in on it. And while the board needs a lot of work to get painted to the level that I want it to be at, like I wouldn't photograph it right now, but like it's definitely playable, and that's just been super fun. That's super duper fun. I'm also dicking around a little bit with Moonstone. I mean, yikes, I don't know. That game's there's too much depth on that game. The skill ceiling on that game is too high, way too high for me. It's a high.
Are the rules free to download?
I think so.
I'll have a look.
I think you should. I think you can get them on they're kind of hard to find. If you can't find them, message me. I'll send you a link. Yeah. But like dude, bro, skill ceiling on that game is so high, but the models are unparalleled. So I'm looking forward to painting some models.
Yeah. The only other, so yeah, that's all cool. Yeah. So basically, we're doing kind of, yeah, I would say I'm trying to steer away from anything GW this coming year, other than Necromunda. Other than Necromunda, because I get so much fun out of running different campaigns for it. It doesn't break my brain every time that a release comes out, and I'm like, I don't know how the game works anymore.
I'll say other than Age of Sigmar, because Age of Sigmar is like the game that I run at my big house events at my own house, because everybody that I know owns some, and it's easy to get a group of people to play it. It's a Games Workshop game, but it's still very fun.
Cool. Oh, and as I've got Scorn, my old Scorn army that I bought on eBay to repaint.
Yeah, I heard that you so rebought crazy. Your own army. That is fucking nuts, dude.
I know, it's so weird to be on eBay and you're just scrolling. I was just scrolling looking for Scorn, and I was like, that's my army. I sold that 4 years ago.
Dude, that is too much, man. That is too much.
More than 4 years ago, actually. I think I sold it before we bought the house, so it's like, that's so crazy. So yeah, that's cool. Okay, well, we'll catch up and talk about other how Blackout's going then, I guess. Hopefully I'll get some more Warmachine in and other projects going on. We'll find out about your terrain, and I think the message is just if you can, play some other stuff other than bloody GW stuff all the time, because
yeah, for real, 100%.
It's pricey, and there's other fun things out there. Cool. Okay, we're going to end the episode there. So thank you again. Actually, I thought we'd just been through this entire fucking episode. We didn't do a fucking introduction whatsoever.
I thought you were going to tack one on the front. It's all good.
No. So thank you, Brendan, for taking part. As always, I'm Chris, one of your regular hosts.
My pleasure to be
and this
here,
is where the intro sequence now plays. That's the end of the episode. Goodbye.
Goodbye.